Good afternoon. Thank you so much for attending this panel and for agreeing to be part of it. NWAMI International Malta wants to start this initiative with a panel on senior citizens and sustainability. We aim to bridge cultural divides and build cohesive communities with our work. And it is estimated that the number of persons aged 60 and older will grow by 46%, outnumbering teenagers and young children. And therefore, our 2021 SDG initiative will focus on senior citizens and the concerns with regards to poverty eradication, health, social inclusion, gender equality, economic growth, reduce disparities, and age-friendly cities. With us here at the panel is Ms. Helga Elul, David Dingley, Regine Seiler, Nikwini Seiler, Myrtle Friester, and Edward Fennick. It is a pleasure to have you here with us today. Can you kindly introduce yourselves a little bit, what you're doing and your background a bit, but very briefly.
You want me to start? Okay, my name is Helga Elul and I'm the president of Core Platform, which is the national platform for corporate social responsibility and sustainability. And we do mainly project work. And I think what Gabriele is doing here is very important, because I feel that in the European, generally in Europe, Western Europe, the older society is greatly overlooked. And we should maybe take a bit more of the Asian part, where they are highly appreciated and looked after. So I think it is very topical to look in the different ways of where in the growing old age segment, more needs to be done and should be done.
Thank you, Helga, for this lovely introduction. David, can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Definitely. My name is David Dingley. I'm the managing consultant for Resource Productivity Consulting Services. I'm also an assistant professor with the Maastricht School of Management in the Netherlands, an active Rotarian in Malta as well. And I'm very, very pleased to be part of this panel to discuss aging and senior citizenship, because I think it is something that interests me personally also in the years to come. But definitely, yes, the senior citizen is a vulnerable group which does require special attention. And as Gabby just said in her introduction, we know the numbers are growing, especially in a number of countries, especially in Western Europe, especially in Malta, where we are here. And we definitely need to address the issue to see if we will be sustainable in the way we are running the country in the next 20 years to come.
Thank you, David. Regine.
Thank you, Gabriela. Hi, everyone. My name is Regine Seiler, and I am the Managing Director of African Media, a small NGO that aims to bring positively the news of Africans in Malta here. And I'm very grateful to be on this panel, because when Gabriela asked me on the first time, I laughed, because I said, maybe I'm not yet there, but I think I'm there, because while researching what is happening in Malta in terms of the better life for older people, I discovered a lot of things. And I am so impressed by what I discovered, getting to know what a country can do for its elderly people, and thinking that immigrants, all citizens in the society should benefit from those possibilities is something that should be spread further into in the news, in panels like this, in conversation like this. And I think it is important always to have someone from the minorities who should be present and remind that the society is multiracial and multicultural, and then we should focus always on that aspect. So
thank you, Regine. Thanks a lot. This was a lovely introduction of you and what you're doing and what you're looking at. Myrtle, good afternoon, Myrtle.
Good afternoon. I'm South African born, British citizen, as you reminded me earlier on. I've lived in the UK for 54 years and 3 years here in Malta. I was formerly a nurse for 13 years in the UK. I've traveled widely. Why? Because I was looking and scouting for disadvantaged girls with high ability, but parents who couldn't afford to pay for their education, like secondary education. I'm a vice president for the Commonwealth Countries League. It's a charity helping to educate girls in the Commonwealth. Malta does not qualify as education is supposedly free here. I've lived in Malta, as I said, since 2018. Our reason for the girls' education is when you educate a girl, you empower a woman, you inspire a community, and it changes lives. Coming back to my aging, I don't know anything about aging, but I will be aged, on Monday, I will be 82. However, I've always just had young friends. So this is a very interesting group of people to teach me something about elderly and aging. Thank you very much. Yes, I do like the subject because I have a friend who is a community nurse and has taught me much. Thank you.
And within your church community, you are also the integration or inclusion special officer, no?
I'm a Catholic since birth, but I go to the Anglican Church in Malta, in Valletta. I have been chosen to be their diversity officer, which means that I have to see that everyone is looked after as far as racism is concerned, whether it be sexual, heterosexual, gay, LGBT, as we call it, black, white friend people that are scared to come forward. A lot of reasons for me being the person to integrate these people. The Anglican Church actually has changed its stance dramatically. The Anglican Church decided that enough was enough. And since Black Lives Matter revolt came about last year, May, they had to change their key points about their policies. The working group that they used, they had this acronym BAME, but they will be spelling out Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, repeatedly in order that it enters the vernacular.
Thank you, Myrtle, but we don't want to digress a little bit because that would bring us to a different topic. I think we would like to take up this topic in a different setting, in a different section, because it's a very important topic. Edward, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yes, good afternoon. Yes, I'm Edward Fennick, and I'm extremely pleased that I'm not the oldest person in this group, because I'm 73 on 2 months' time, and I thought I was feeling relatively senior, but obviously I do have another senior member. So thank you for being here. I have spent my life in management overseas. My education was in Malta, not really Malta, because at the age of 5 I went to school in England. I spent all my education in England, in Germany. I've worked in Australia and in Japan, and I retired officially at the age of 62 or 63, where I wanted to do new things in life. Since 2005, I have been involved heavily with India. India has been my life, so to speak, for many reasons. And with my Rotary Club, we have done numerous things there. But the most important is that the focus has always been on females, the children, at schools, and also the helping of females in workplace, home, etc. And that is still going on to this very day. And so I'm very, very, very intrigued to be here today, because the subject is one of tremendous concern and has absolutely no universal level, because wherever you go, you will find a different story and a different problem. So I'm very pleased today to be able to hear as much as I can.
Thank you so much, Edward, for your valid contribution. In this initiative, we will be targeting actually 6 SDGs. SDG 1, with regards to poverty alleviation and leave nobody behind. We will work on or address SDG 3, which ensures healthy lives and promote well-being for all ages. Then SDG 10, reducing inequality. Then SDG 11, make cities, human settlements inclusive and safe for all. And then 16 and 17. SDG 16 is peace, justice, and strong institutions. And SDG 17, collaboration and partnerships. So starting off, the topic ending poverty for all, leaving nobody behind. And ensuring that the SDGs are met at all levels of society and all ages, with a particular focus on the most vulnerable group, as we just identified, the aging population, be it locals as well as migrants. And I find even stepping up the migrant senior citizen is even more vulnerable than the local. From your observations, I would like to ask the panel or your experience, what is the current situation in Malta, and what national actions and community or individual actions could be carried out to leave nobody behind? Can we briefly give an input, just at random, whoever feels like speaking?
Well, if we take Malta in particular, one has to be very subjective and one has to be very open-minded. As a nation, we have the laws, we have a number of systems, we have a number of initiatives, and when that is compared with many other countries, it's extremely a positive situation. So before one can look at the negatives, one has to appreciate the positives. And Malta in particular has a good foundation stone. And I think that is where we can start with, as far as Malta is concerned, in being able to take that foundation stone and make it stronger than it is today. And that, unfortunately, needs political will. And in a report on the Times of Malta in 2014, it made it very, very, very clear that both parties did not really have the will of wanting to get deeply involved in these subjects, and that basically they just scratched the surface. So whilst I think that we will find always individuals who are prepared and are ready to move that extra mile, we all depend on each other at the end of the day. And it all comes back to laws, it comes back to finance and other issues. So whilst I know there is a need in many areas to improve the life of pensioners, I would state at this point in time, as far as Malta is concerned, we already have a very good, strong base.
Helga, what is your opinion on that? I see you.
I mean, as Edward is saying, I think we are, or we were till now, lucky in Malta that we have very strong community help and community spirit. And I think it's based mainly as well on the faith, because a lot of it is church initiatives. But I am a bit worried that with the young generation, that is actually, we are losing this value a bit. Because obviously they are so busy, both have to work. It's a tough life out there to make it. And obviously COVID and our situation hasn't helped neither. But I think one of the biggest issues I still think a bit is, again, our pension system. We have a pension system, but we have just recently in the papers as well seen that especially where marriages break down and the wife has been at home looking after the children, doing all this work, but actually has not paid an eye, and there might be a separation, she's left literally on her own because the pension goes to the husband. So, I mean, I think we need to look a bit into all this because it came out in the paper now recently, this issue. And also we have seen that the poverty level in aging is actually increasing. So I think even the pension level might not be enough today for older people to care enough, because we have a good medical system, but still a lot of medicines are not given out for free, so they have to get them. So I think we need to look a bit into these areas.
David.
Yes, if I may add something to that, I definitely agree with what Edward said, that indeed, as a country, we definitely have very stable and very solid institutions, especially where the social system is concerned. However, as we know, aging people are going to face expenses, which today you can nearly question whether the maximum pension of 12,000 euros a year is going to be enough to create a healthy and positive way of life. So all this really needs to be taken back to people before they are actually old. So the question is, what job did you have? How much did you earn? How much did you put aside thinking about your old age? Some people do that. Some people made a lot of money in life and therefore don't really depend on the government pension to live a good life after pensionable age. But other people who might have been on the lower income brackets will definitely be totally dependent on that pension. Today, we know if you don't own your own property, rent is extremely high. So it's hard to see how that's going to take people forward. Today, we've got new expenses as well. We want older people to connect on the internet. Well, how much is an internet subscription per month? We want people to have the mobile phone. Well, how much is your mobile phone costing you per month? So we've got all these additional expenses, apart from, as Helga mentioned, medicines possibly and all that sort of thing, that it's not going to be easy for elderly people to sustain a healthy lifestyle. And then again, one has to think, what if you are a couple and you are in pensionable age? How are you going to sustain that? What if you don't have family support, for that matter? Because although a number of elderly people in Malta, and this is where the closed kind of the small society tends to help, do have a lot of family support, but we would be making a mistake to think that everybody has this. Some people are literally on their own. And very often the ones on their own are the women. We tend to find more elderly women who are widowed, and we tend to find more elderly men who are still married. Obviously, if you look at the demographics, women tend to outlive men if you see it in the general statistics. So in that respect, higher probability for women to literally be alone. And women tend to find it harder to create social networks in their older age, while men tend to still maintain a bit of a better social life than elderly women. So there are all these aspects that come into play over here.
Thank
But as
you,
we
David.
said, I'll just add one more thing. As we said, if you even take the very fact that we have a very, very strong health system, a free health system, that is extremely, extremely something, as Edward said, we cannot take for granted. Just give one example. 3 days ago, I had to rush my mother to hospital in the evening. And we were there around 10 o'clock. We saw an eye specialist, very, very nice people, extremely competent and patient doctor, especially in explaining to her and repeating. And as we're walking out, my mother turns to me and my brother, do we owe them anything? Do we have to pay? And I said, no, this is the government hospital. This is free. We've paid for this in our taxes, like. And that's when you really realize, wow, are we lucky that we really have a system that works in this way? So yeah, there are many, many good things, but some people are definitely going to be left behind. And we need to obviously always look at the extremes, at the fringes, to see how to pull those up.
I would, with this, I would like to hand the word to Regine, as a matter of fact, to see from her side how the world looks from this end.
Yes, well, the last word from David was left behind. You know, it is something that speaks to our communities, which are who tends to be left behind, not because there's nothing there for them. The laws, the policies are there for every citizen, but again, on paper. Now, also, Maltese suffer about being left behind, because I was reading recently from one of the reports I was researching, that loneliness hits a lot at the moment. Men, especially the over 60, that end up visiting parlors or supposedly massage parlors, and they catch sexual diseases. Actually, AIDS, it is increasing into the aging, some French of the population age over 60 in Malta, because of the sexual frequentation into those parlors. So there are people who suffer loneliness that are not being looked after, and that ends being sick. And we're talking here about Maltese citizens. Now, if you want to come into the immigrant community, which is naturally, I must use that word, naturally really left behind until they don't struggle themselves to get into the system. When you were talking about the fact that the health system, it is free only for a certain category of people. If you are an immigrant, you don't show your pay slips, and you have to pay. So it's not free, actually. I will not pay because my husband is Maltese, but if my husband wasn't Maltese, me working in Malta, paying taxes here, I will pay to get the cure. So there are still those inequalities that exist for the minorities that must be considered. They do exist.
Myrtle.
I don't know what to say, but I do know this much via a friend who is a community nurse, that she said that the drugs for the elderly, and I know because in that respect I'm elderly, are free. Some are not. Some medicines both cost a lot. Some depression medicines cost a lot, and services find it hard to buy this. I heard of a drug that is a medication to stop clots. It's a new drug to replace warfarin. It's cheap warfarin, but the cost of blood tests, clinic time, etc., costs a lot. So with this new drug, there's no need for blood tests. So if you are old, elderly, or senior, a nurse has to visit you to take blood regularly and to go and clog up the polyclinic. So in that respect, we as elderly perhaps will not be able to afford it. We just won't. I'm a single lady and I pay for a lot of drugs, not a lot, 3, but I get 2 free. I was told when I came here, I came here via Togham, and I was told that I was entitled at St. Luke's Hospital, a reciprocal NHS, National Health Service, but I have to pay for most things, for doctor, for everything. How long can I sustain that as a pensioner? And I don't get pension in Malta. But for the Maltese, I feel that most of these people are left alone because the only person they see is the nurse, and they suffer depression, loneliness, no physical contact, only when they get washed in the morning. Those are the things that I find worrisome. Thank you.
Edward.
Yes, I think one has to look at things in many perspectives and not be so perhaps narrow in one's judgment or one's looks at things. First of all, the issue of the age is an issue that has been perhaps catapulted mostly in the last 20, 30, 40 years. The United Nations really came out in its first strong laws in something like, I think, 1982 with the Vienna International Plan for the Aging. It was followed again almost 10 years after with provisions for the old age. And recently, so to speak, in 2002, the United Nations again, at the Madrid International, came out with new policies as well. So it is an ongoing situation of acceptance that there is a problem. Otherwise, these subjects would not keep on coming up to the front. In 2020, the Vatican had a 3 months, whatever they call them, conference regarding the age. And it was very clear by the Pope, who made it very clear that the aged need to have special attention because of what they have given to life. So there is an acceptance that there is a need to review these situations and to work over them on a continuous basis. But we speak about the theory, and let's talk a little about the practice, and let's talk about my own personal experiences. One thing that hits an individual if he's led a fairly normal life is suddenly at the age of 70, you start getting little notes in your system that tells you you're aging. And suddenly you start to develop A, B, C, and D. And it just comes out of the blue. It just happens. And it happened to me. I really, really had nothing to complain about. I don't even have a family doctor. I was never ill. And suddenly, reaching the age of 70, my health deteriorated. There are the systems available, but they are not working. The hospital is excellent. When you go to hospital, you are treated in a very professional way. It's excellent. But the hurdles of getting treated, unless it's an emergency, are unbelievable. Now, I have 3 problems at the moment. One of them is a heart problem. I have a nerve problem, and I have a hernia. The hernia is the least urgent, but is the most painful. Now, my nerve system comes from having been operated on my back for a slit disc, and unfortunately, they touched my nerve system, and I have a dying nerve system in my feet. I'm in pain all the time, have been for the last 15 years, and now it's reaching the stage where I can't feel my feet properly. My heart came through the fact that I went and said, I have something wrong. And they did all the tests, and they told me, you got nothing wrong with you. I then gave them a breakdown of my family history. That shocked them, and suddenly I went for more tests. I was meant to have been seen by the hospital about 9 months after this particular episode. And I realized that 9 months was too long. And therefore, not only with one specialist, but all the 3 specialists, if you want treatment, if you want to expedite it, you've got to go and see them privately.
You pay.
What does that mean? Let's look at the heart. The heart must be operated on at our central hospital. All the other hospitals are not authorized to do any heart operations. So you find out who is responsible at the hospital in this particular area. The visits are between 120 to 350 each time you visit the specialist. It is diabolical. You have an 8 o'clock appointment. They see you at 10 o'clock. You go in, the nurse looks at you. She does all the instruments. Then the specialist comes in for 3 minutes. He basically puts you through the drain, tells you you're too fat, you're too this, you're too that, you're too that. It's all your fault. Come back in 6 months' time and make sure you lose 10 kilos. without fail, every single appointment I've had has been cancelled 2 weeks before and has been put to 3 months down the track. So between one visit and another, there is a 9-month gap. If I was unhealthy, I would be dropping dead before these. Now, is this the policy? Is this the system? There is an element of finance that a person can afford. But when one goes into this type of treatment, it becomes exceptionally expensive. So within my own vision of the whole medical system, I know it's there, I know it's available, I know that it's good, but actually getting to it has become exceptionally difficult. And we live in a nation of who do you know? Parallel lines, my brother, who is a person who knows 101 people, for every 100 he knows, I know half, literally, right? He has problems, but he's going through fast track because he knows who to speak to. And this is where it all becomes uneven. Now, I am not at the bottom of the pile, but God forbid if I was not a fighter and I tried to get to the top. So we have fundamentally the rules and the regulations that says this should happen, but because of the human aspect, and the humans are humans, the system does not work. And this is just a small little example of my own personal feelings and my own personal experiences on a day-to-day basis. And these are the issues that are very hard to change, because today, I think we have all the goodwill to look at the problems and to try and find roads forward. But finding these roads forwards are very difficult when you come to actually apply them. I know, because I spend so much time in India, that I'm privileged.
Edward,
but that doesn't
sorry
make it...
to interrupt you, but I mean, I understand you brought a very important point up, right? That the systems are not, actually we are addressing 2 SDGs at the same time. One is the health SDGs and the other the systemic way, where we definitely need to look into and see what communities, as well as how we can work together, how this can be addressed and tackled. Because I mean, I think you lived and experienced the situation, and I'm sure you're not the single person who went through that. It's not an exception, and systems need to also always revise their mode of functioning, as a matter of fact, because time is changing and so are systems changing, and this is very important. Because peace, justice, and strong institutions, in terms of leaving nobody behind, that is a systemic perspective where we need to move out of the siloism and learn to collaborate. There is always, sometimes also a lack of information from one end to the other. David, you're nodding. I mean, do you want to share something to that?
No, it's okay, carry on. I'm just following you.
I would like to hear some other thoughts. Helga?
No, I think, Kepi, what is needed as well, and I think what Edward said is very relevant. And Edward is, in a way, such lucky that he has support, he has somebody to help him. He's a fighter himself, he's educated, he knows how to do it. But just take elderly, which are on their own, maybe not to this level, they won't be able to cope with all of that.
Absolutely.
And I think what we need is more sort of like health clinics and community service, and rather than this, I mean, the hospital, like David said before, is professional, it's very well run, but everything is pointing to this big hospital where we have, if we would have more village type or community type health centers, which then can refer, can be, you know, if you are on your own in your small community, you can go yourself and you have a doctor there and he can help you to the next steps. I think we need that level Because I mean, if you are on your own, you don't drive, you don't have maybe children, or they are working, they don't have the time. How are you going to cope with the system? You will not.
I think the first problem, let's look at elderly again. I think problem one is elderly don't know what help they could get. I think that is already, an initial phase of a problem. And I think this is where our communities, especially our local councils, could do much more in terms of promoting with the elderly what services are either available at community level or even at national level, and how to get them. Why doesn't everybody after a certain age receive a little brochure or a booklet with all the services, all the phone numbers, all the email addresses, whatever, up to date to the time that it was sent to them? It's like, I don't know, your 70th birthday gift, let's put it that way. But it can be extremely useful. So anything you need, you know, one, it exists, two, how to get it, what number to call. And if there need be, yes, an elderly person then will, you know, get a taxi and maybe go and get this service. I mean, talking about having to go to the hospital, at least in our area, I live in Sweden, but the closest health center for our area is the Gzira Health Center. We are associated with the Gzira Health Center. It is definitely a place one tends to go to for the first kind of stop. And then if they need be, they will refer you obviously on to hospital. But one needs to know where these places are, who is there, what they can do for you, if you have a right to use it, if you don't. And I think much more education needs to happen for the elderly in this respect. Because once they know, knowledge is everything. Eh? Once you know, then you can maybe apply for a particular service or know that it exists, you know, for that matter.
Thank you very much, Regine. You were listening attentively. What are your thoughts from your end?
To be honest with you, I think, and for what I've researched and what I've saw at the hospital, Malta is doing great with the elderly people. Really, I have to say it has to be recognized. Their services that are offered are good. And if taking an individual experience, it is awful. I will not go as long as my friend went early, but I can tell a story of what happened to me with a lady that I was accompanied to the hospital with her 2 children. And we arrived, and what happened is that she couldn't speak English, so I was going to help her to speak English. And we entered the room of that doctor, a very young girl who is a doctor, and then she asked us who needs the cure. I said, the lady, I accompany her because she cannot speak English, so I will be helping her. She said, we are too many in the room. I cannot have you all in the room. We know someone has to go out. And I said, okay, who will go out? The 2 children who are 2 years old and 3 years old, or me, the interpreter, who goes out? These are the things that you heard at the hospital from a doctor. How can you even ask such a question? So these are one of examples that happens every day in the life of immigrant at the hospital. You also have a doctor who talk to you in Maltese immediately, like, okay, you're living in Malta, you should be able to understand by the time. It is frustrating. The service is there, more or less good or bad. The service there, it is good. You are even able to pay. You have to pay, but I will come to a point where I have to mention representation, because I believe that among all the issues that we can face as people, even for Maltese elderly people, that they can face individually, for the fact that you have to wait for 6 months before getting an appointment, there is that specific issues that immigrants face that shouldn't be. For me, they have to be taken at a level where there is a national conversation about that, because they are just not acceptable. They are horrible.
Regine has a point here. Unfortunately, in life, there are always 2 levels. You've got the institutional level that creates maybe the standards, the norms, and the rules and the laws. But then you have individuals.
Yeah.
So wherever you go, sometimes it's always a matter of who is that person you are with.
Yeah.
Is that person, you know, racist? Is that person sexist?
Yeah.
Is that person going to treat you well? Or is that person not going to? Irrespective of what the law or the regulation should be. And at the end of the day, that is the encounter you are having. Whether you find a nice, well-educated person that can abide by the system or not. And possibly, obviously, as a Maltese, probably we don't face this anywhere near migrants and non-Maltese nationals might face, you know, in terms of any kind of personal discrimination that anybody might have. And that is a barrier that is extremely difficult to remove just by setting the rule, you know. You can set the rule, but at the end, no one is in the polyclinic in the room next to you with the doctor, if you know what I mean. So what's happening in there is really going to be dependent on the individuals. And this is why awareness becomes so important. This is why public, you know, you have to keep talking about things. You have to keep repeating things all the time, all the time. I mean, I'll just give an analogy here. I remember being in a company that is ISO certified for quality, you know, the high quality standard you can get. And the managing director was telling me, oh, Dave, we have to mention quality every day to everyone in order to make them aware how important it is, which you would think is normal to them because they have the, but yet they have to keep drumming it in. And this is about everything that we want change for, everything where we want to see change at cultural and national level.
Have to
We
really
need to keep pushing and pushing, because if we think and say, oh, we told them last week, we don't need to say it again. Oh, we are wrong. We have to say it again and again and again, because this kind of change, especially at individual level, takes time.
The change of
That is
mindset.
going to take time. Yes.
If I may digress, I'll give you an example, which is a horrific example because it happened to me. My mother over 11, 12 years ago was admitted to hospital after a stroke. When my mother entered, she could still speak and she could still swallow. When we went in, we realized the importance that when a person has a stroke, they should be attended to within the first hours. It is part of the rules of having a stroke that you should be attended to. We put pressure on the staff and we got a straight blank answer. There are a lot of young people here and we have to look after the young first. They told me to my face that my mother, being a senior citizen, would not be seen until the younger people would be seen first. I spent a number of hours there with my brother, and after some time, I said, look, I'm going to go home, I'm going to shower, I'll come back, and then I'm going to relieve you. When I came back, my mother had been in the corridor for 17 hours. I looked at my mother, I went to the top medical person I could find, and I said, my mother's going to die in the corridor. They panicked, they took her in, they asked me if they could give the last rites, which I obviously said yes to, and my mother died soon after. Now, my mother had reached the age of 89, and the age of living was perhaps not that far away that she would die. But the fact is that because the system failed, because she was not looked upon as being important because of her age, whilst waiting for treatment, she deteriorated to a state that she could not return from. And I recall I used to go there every day, and I recall the doctor telling to me, you are one of the few people that has given dignity to your mother's death. And I say this because whilst I was there, there were other people who were suffering the way my mother was. And in the corridor, the children were fighting over the will. And what it shows is that society has this breakdown. There is a society breakdown in the way that people look at each other. The younger generation even look at people who are 35 years old. We are reaching a stage of little boxes where everybody's put into a category, and that is the way we currently stand in. So we do have laws, we do have systems, we have 101 things, but the practicality and the reality are very different.
Anyway, can I add something? I wanted just to say that on paper things are great, because I know about the document, the 2014-2020 document, which is called the National Plan for Aging Strategy. There are even more documents. You have the one which is called the Aging for Dementia. And you have another one, which is the one about, let me find the minimum standard for care homes for older people. For me, I was impressed about those documents, because they explain, they show that the Maltese government is thinks about the older generation, that there are things in place to help them. I was looking around into those documents just to try to find if, of course, there is something that is related to immigrant, to the vulnerable people. Of course, elderly people are already vulnerable, and I was not even expecting to find something about immigrants, because it shouldn't be, there shouldn't be a category when it comes to health, the health issues. But I think I want to add it here, because I'm not sure if I will have the opportunity to put into, and maybe to add among the recommendations, because I could see in one of those documents there were 17 recommendations, and maybe one of those recommendations can be representation. Because yeah, we have a lot of people going to the hospital or attending a lot of services, but immigrants are usually participants, receivers of the services. What about seeing them as service providers? As I have a good example that I want, sometimes I like, many times I want to take that. When during COVID, we have the Dr. Kauchi, the superintendent Kauchi at Castile. Why not call a doctor from African descent to be here with her to talk about COVID in a way that the population will see that these are people who belong to our society? What not have a lady with a hijab in the Maltese television talking about, as a representative of an expert of something, talking, explaining to the Maltese what is happening on this specific sector of the life, so that we don't tell to people immigrants are belong us. You have to treat them equally, but we are sending the message that these are the people who belong to our society. So be aware when they go to the hospital, when to go to in a care home. These are the services that they expect to receive as everybody else. I think representation will be the key to solving the problem of discrimination of immigrants, apart from the other issues that
So how can the civil sector, third sector, help lobby on this? What can be done? So any idea of the panelists, please?
I will say something. Gabi, I think as a group that you set up very well, why don't we get all the facts that everybody has discussed together and send it to Chris Fern as the health minister? These are facts that we have gathered from a lot of people who were panelists on your group.
This is one person.
There was a lot of discussion here, but who's going to use it? Just us?
No, the discussion will be publicized at the European website.
Oh,
so it is not only. We are linked to the European initiative, the European SDG initiative. So anything we publish will be followed. So there will be, so that is why the recommendation is very important, that we bring in recommendations. And the question is like, what can be done? You know, what can be done on the third sector level of initiatives? What projects can we develop to inspire representations, you know?
I think it is very clear that we need to try and expedite the situation, in the sense that currently within Europe and within America, 1 in 4 is over the age of 60. In the world, it is not yet that. It is approximately 1 in 6. There is an aging situation and an aging problem, which is a worldwide problem. When we are looking just at Malta, perhaps being so small, we may find the solutions far easier than other nations can, because we have the proximity, everything is close to each other, we don't have the same problems. And if there is a model that could be an example to others, it could be Malta, because we do have, as a culture, although it has changed a lot, of the care of the elderly. I mean, it has changed a lot, because before, elderly people could rely on remaining looked after by their children, etc. Today, the children try and push them off as quickly as possible. So things have changed. But as an island, we should be in a better position than most other places to be able to do something more positive. Naturally, we're living in difficult times, because as soon as this particular pandemic is over, we are going to go through the very painful financial situation of the world. We have lost a lot of the steam that we have built up, and the next excuses are going to be, now we don't have the money. You know, so we are heading for more problems as time goes by. And some of the things that are required are not that difficult. You know, some things can be arranged as long as we had the mentality to. But we don't have the mentality, unfortunately. We are fragmented between ages, between, unfortunately, religions, colors, etc., etc., etc.
Absolutely.
And that is a barrier that life has always had.
And I want to add something to what has been discussed so far. It's a human problem. It's not a national problem. It is a human problem, because we find problems like this across societies, across nations. It's not exclusively for this specific country or the situation, because when I look into Germany, into my own country of birth, we encounter similar issues, very much so. I feel that in Malta we are actually blessed and much more cared for, and there is the human factor, which is still very much laudable, which is there, you know, the human initiative. And this way I can say, how can we, because we are a small country, human initiatives and community initiatives are so important, because everybody almost knows everybody. We can reach each other. So how can we reach out to have this integration, inclusion going to happen, as a matter of fact?
I mean, Gabby, there is one of the issues. I mean, and like you said, I mean, in Malta, we have, first and foremost, a lot of non-profit organizations and a lot of small units who are trying to do something within their community, or then we have larger ones like Rotary and Caritas and whatever. Unfortunately, in the smaller NGOs, there's a lot of duplication. And there's a lot of not working together. We know, we experienced it. And I think that is such a waste, because it's duplication. We could be much more effective in our small island if we work closer, communicate with non-profit organizations, and they are always necessary, because government is one thing, but I think you need to have the other civil society initiatives. But if they could work closer and not duplicate, and each one has its niche and communicate, we could be so much more effective.
Absolutely.
But it is very, very difficult in Malta, in this small community where it should be easy it is one of the most difficult things in business and in non-profit, because people love to have their own small
territory.
Yes. I mean, this is the mindset, but I think if we could overcome and push that a bit more, we could be far more effective.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I fully agree on that. And that is actually one of NWAMI's outlook or mission, is to bridge these gaps and to bring these
people together,
initiatives together, and to find a dialogue, debates like this one, and create platforms. And which actually brings us to the last SDG, to collaboration and partnerships. Can somebody add to what Helga said? Is there some idea, some thoughts to that?
But Gabby, maybe it's as well, it would be an important topic to discuss into more detail with Jesmond Taliba, with the chairman of the voluntary organization, because he could be very instrumental, and he worked in the non-profit, he worked with Dal Providenza, and he worked with other institutions, so he knows the issues. So if he, as a role model, could try and bring maybe these dialogues together in synergy, I think that could be a very important role for him.
That is a wonderful idea. I mean, we were lucky enough to have his initial address. I just finished an interview with him this morning, and it is what I heard on his agenda.
If I can, there is a lot of discussion today. As the lady said, what happens to the discussion? I'll give you one example where there's a total failure of a nation that everybody sees, everybody knows about, and it happens and continues. Being a person with a disability or old age, whatever it may be, the challenge of a daily walk on the pavement is a nightmare.
Oh God.
There is absolutely horrendous access for a human being to walk on a pavement in most areas. It seems to be a simple thing, because we have to look at the development we've had in roads and so on to do decent pavements where old people, people with wheelchairs and so on can actually communicate together. And that simple thing just doesn't happen. We've had cosmetic tiles put around Valletta in some places so the visually impaired can get around. But it is all really just,
there's a long way to go.
I can really agree fully, Edward, because we did a project at Core Platform with the SLIMA Council, and it was together with SOS, I think from 3 or 4 years back, where we had this brainwave that some of the issues the elderly had, as well, especially if they are single at home, was mobility. So we went into a whole drive, and we got a lot of corporate sponsors to try and make these small electric scooters for them to go out, and they could hire them and they were maintained at Capua Palace, and they could go out. We thought they would want to go out to church, but they wanted mainly to go to the bank, or they go to the hairdresser, go to have a coffee. The biggest issue was they could not use them because of the state of the pavement. And I can tell you the local SLIMA Council tried its utmost, but there is as well a very strange mentality in Malta, and you know about it, that everybody in his garage has his ramp. So, I mean, even sometimes for government, it is difficult to level out a pavement because everybody puts his individual ramp to his garage. I mean, there's no law, and I don't know how they can do it, but if you go and look around, in fact, we had the other initiative, because then we were contacted by the Nasha local council to do something like that. They wanted something similar, and we actually ended up, instead of the scooters, of having an 8-seater bus to drive the elderly around, and it's a continuous bus service which is supported by the businesses, very, very effective, and it's still running. But the scooter, which would be more independent and more individually, we couldn't do it simply because of the state of the pavement.
So which is actually the SDG 11. Make cities and settlements inclusive, safe, and resilient, sustainable, which is a big gap, as a matter of fact. So this here too can be that there is so much more work to be done, and there is so much more space for projects, for small projects and initiatives. Rounding it all up with regards to collaboration and partnerships, I would like everybody to have a concluding word to our platform, to our panel discussion today, to sum it a little bit up. And because what we did today is a cross-functional collaboration, because everybody from you comes from a different sector, from a different civil initiative, corporate initiative, private initiative. So could you please find a final word for that today?
Well, could they petition this government? Could petition the government or transport minister regarding the roads and pavements to make it safer?
Thank you, Myrtle.
I think, Gabby, what I would like as a conclusion is to try and maybe find a way, even as well with media, more to address the young generation.
Yes.
Try and tell them you are here and you are what you are today because of us older generation. To try and put the value back of appreciating, like they have in Asia, appreciating what has been given to you as a young person through the hard work and through the thing. I think we need to again try and put maybe even some media, whatever, into it to try and bring this value a bit stronger out.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that is necessary. Because I mean, obviously, nobody would have advanced to that level if it wouldn't have been for the hard work of all the aging people.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Helga. David.
Yes, of course, where the collaboration issue is concerned, we've heard some very valid points where NGOs need to, of course, talk more together, but we also need to see the bridge between NGOs and government at the end of the day. It has to be enhanced. I'm not saying there isn't, but it also needs to be enhanced. Otherwise, NGOs will just talk together forever, but at the end, they don't make the policy. They don't make the law. So ultimately, everything that comes out of an NGO needs to be transferred to the higher authorities who are the ultimate policymakers and who control the budget. Because even if we want pavements to be mended, it's a budget at the end of the day. And it's only the Ministry of Finance that is going to control that budget. So there must be a very, very good link between NGOs and government. And government needs to be pretty much aware that it needs to listen to the words of NGOs, because NGOs at the end of the day have their roots with the population as well. So they can learn a lot as well on that matter.
Because that is actually the duty of the NGOs, to be the bridge, to reach out. Because when our ears are closed, and when NGOs do their own thingy just for the sake that they do something, but without serving the communities they need to serve, the message will drop into the end, will drop into the desert sand, so to say, and not into the. We need to pool our sources together and absolutely. Regine, what do you think?
Yes, I want to add to what David said about NGOs, because I wanted to say something about collaboration. Actually, NGOs find it very difficult to collaborate because there is that competition for projects, for budget. That is a reality that we all live. But there are some attempts to do something. I know about the Malta Refugee Council, for example. It is a group of NGOs that work together to try to improve the lives of refugees in Malta. There is another one which is called Network for Equality. The same idea, trying to come together to work on projects together. And there's also, because I know I have attended a lot of meetings, the will to collaborate a lot with the government, so that when we have a common policy, we try to place them to be implemented. But let's say it here, the government is not very keen to listening to NGOs. It is you know, there's that fight between government and NGO. It's not an easy relationship. So NGOs cry, they really cry because I can see I'm there. So we don't stop. NGOs don't stop pushing. It is hard, but there is the work. Do things, yeah.
Sorry, Myrtle. Edward, a concluding sentence?
My concluding one is almost from Nostradamus or the Doomsday Book, perhaps. Unfortunately so, because we, in my lifetime, the respect for politics and politicians has gone, respect for religion has gone, and the fundamental importance of life, the nucleus, is the family. And the family values and the family lives have also diminished tremendously. And in reality, we can really continue flogging till we kill these horses and move on. We have a fundamental problem in society of being family. And these are the values we have to try and get back, which is a hell of a difficult thing because we've lost it in just about every single sector. It is no use being with one head in the cloud and not realizing what's around you. Around us, we have communities of people who are less respectful than they were ever before. We have a younger generation that cares about itself. So in order for the society to survive, it needs to do two things. Either it has to harmonize what it has lost, or it has to dig its heels, and literally it becomes almost political that the over 60s become a force within themselves. Because, to be honest, I trust nobody. And we could talk forever and a day, but action is the only thing that works. If all of you are prepared tomorrow to come with me and to lie down on the pavement, chained together and say, because these pavements are not safe, I'll do it and we'll get into the press. But if we send a nice letter to the president, to the prime minister, to the archbishop, it's going to mean absolutely nothing. That's my concluding.
Yep. But I don't agree with it being in a website. Who's going to see it? Who's going to read it? We must write and petition as we do in England. We petition for everything.
It's a long process.
Okay, let's fight.
Yes.
Thank you. With this last thoughts and reflections, I would like to thank the panel for a very rich, deep discussion with some concerning facts that were brought on the table, realities and not paper writing, not prose, but facts, sometimes uncomfortable for the ear to listen. But the lived experience is that what counts. And we work for our voices to be heard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Gabby, for your initiative to start this ball rolling. I've learned something because I'm elderly, but I haven't got one elderly friend.
Thank you. Thank you, Gabby.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks for your collaboration.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Good day.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well.